So one issue or question I think has been raised in a few films this year is just the intersection of faith and science. I'm thinking of Interstellar, Christopher Nolan's film about the cosmos and time and space, and then The Theory of Everything, which is another Academy Award nominee about Stephen Hawking. So I just think it's interesting that you have these two films. Hawking and his theories were even referenced in Interstellar, I think, and they're both kind of exploring at a time when science and faith really are kind of butting heads, and there's a lot of scientists who say, like, you know, they can't, never the twain shall meet in these two categories. And yet I feel like both of those films are kind of like seeking and questioning about God and the meaning of God, even in The Theory of Everything, like the line that Stephen Hawking says when he's defining cosmology to his wife, his future wife, and he says—
Who's a Christian.
Who's a Christian, yeah, so that the dynamic is right there in their marriage. But he says cosmology is a religion for intelligent atheists. So, so just the idea of a substitute for religion. I feel like Interstellar, even in the music, which is very organ-based, it feels like church. Like, so it's painting this picture of like science and the cosmos as replacing God or a substitute religious.
Everyone places their faith in something.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So any thoughts about either of those films from this perspective?
I didn't get to see them, so I'll let you guys have that.
Well, I didn't see the Hawking film. I haven't seen it yet.
Okay.
I want to, and I will eventually. But Interstellar it's been described sort of as a 2001 for this decade. And it actually reminded me of a film that came out in the 90s, the Carl Sagan adaptation with Jodie Foster, Contact,
totally. Yes.
in which characters go in search of something other and, spoiler alert, kind of find themselves, right? It's a very human-centered universe that Contact and Interstellar both create. So as a Christian watching these films, and certainly I like keeping up on different scientific advancements and so forth. I think that's fascinating. I think every Christian should be engaged to a certain degree at that level, because when you're looking at science, you know, the Bible says the heavens declare the glory of God, and so when you're looking closely at space and science and how things are put together, you're really exploring God's creation in detail, and that's a wondrous thing. So there's a lot of gorgeous imagery in Interstellar. Some of the visual ideas are stunning. But it does land theologically in a place where a lot of Christians would, you know, take issue with. But at the same time, you know, the search is important. I think anyone who's honest with themselves and who is examining their lives will go on this search. And the journey itself is what makes Interstellar interesting. And Matthew McConaughey's whole arc. And it does have some very clever Christopher Nolan-esque folding and twists and so forth. Time. And also so many scientific concepts that are rattled off so quickly. You're like, wait, what? Can you say that again more slowly and in words of one syllable?
Wormholes.
So I found that to be a very enjoyable film on that level. But what do you think?
I thought it was interesting. Oh, just a brief side note. I thought it was interesting that Matthew McConaughey starred in this film and in Contact. You know, as in Contact, he was the voice of faith. You know, he was the pastor that Jodie Foster had a relationship with. So yeah, I don't know if he is consciously exploring this theme in his films, but
Nolan himself is a mystery to me as well. As an auteur, he's very he's very private, right? And his films are different things to different people, but in some ways he's a very conservative moralist. And you get the sneaking suspicion that he may have some kind of faith in God, but he's not telling just yet. And so that's always intrigued me, as the man behind these visionary movies. What does he really believe?
I think he's fascinated with the complexity of the natural world and with human psychology. So Inception is very much enraptured with the complexity of the human mind and technology. And the quote that I was reminded of with Interstellar and with The Prestige, is another Nolan film, is I forget who said it, but the idea that science, when it gets to a certain point of progression, is indistinguishable from magic. And so I feel like he's taken with this idea that science, when it gets to the point where we can't really understand it, it will look like magic. And that happens in Interstellar with the ghosts.
Yes.
You know, that turn out to have a natural explanation.
Right.
But it is interesting because even movies as fantastical as Inception and Interstellar, as fantastical as they are both, I think they both offer a pretty kind of deterministic worldview. Right. I mean, in both cases, even with the ghosts in the case of Interstellar, I mean, there's clear scientific explanation for why that even happens. I'm not going to spoil the movie by telling you the ending. So it is interesting that these are deterministic universes, but at the same time, there is that sense of wonder, like you said. And it's very much the kind of wonder that people like Richard Dawkins talks about, that people like Carl Sagan talked about, is that it is a wonder without the supernatural. It is simply the awe, the majesty of the natural creation. And you get that Interstellar.
Absolutely. And scientists are still struggling to explain just what is consciousness and what, you know, how does that work? It's beyond science at this point, and it can never be explained. And so what they're really groping after is this idea of the soul.
Right. Yeah, it's just super interesting, just the language that we need to have these discussions, and just the hesitance on the part of scientists to use language that isn't kind of material, like explanations to everything, natural explanations. And
because even that scene, that very interesting scene with Anne Hathaway talking about love.
Right.
I mean, she was talking about it in such a kind of
the fifth dimension is love.
Exactly, but it's still at the same time, it is a very kind of firmly materialist kind of worldview, which I thought was fascinating. It doesn't diminish the power, the beauty of what she's saying, but at the same time, there's a very clear scientific and materialist underpinning.
And you have that kind of love tension in Theory of Everything as well. Yes. You've seen it. I mean, there's the tension is he's trying to find a theory, a unifying theory of everything, but he has a love story with his wife, and like there's all this like relationship dynamic that is messy and it isn't perfect.
Right.
And
there are things like love that you know, not scientifically, but on a matter of deep intuition.
Right.
And scientists often struggle with their own feelings.
What do they do about that? Like,
right?
How does that fit into scientific?
Exactly, and in the context, one more thing on Interstellar, in the context of Nolan's career, I think it represents a refreshing step forward into a kind of almost sentimental territory, where he's very cerebral and very intellectual in his films, but this one represents a sort of, if you will, an evolutionary leap in his
nicely done.
In his approach to this cerebral material, and allowing room for emotions in a way that his previous films haven't really done.
There's one particular scene, and the scene we all know, I mean, there's one particular scene in the movie that is so moving that when I was watching it, I actually found myself weeping, and that's the first time it's ever happened with a Nolan film.
Yeah.
Because like you said, he's very cerebral,
very
very
cold.
It's kind of gushy in some ways, and quite moving.
I think he has I call it a very British gaze. Like,
yes.
kind of like an unemotional, cold, but very like precise and detailed. And,
yes.
Exactly.
Punctual.
Yeah, so I'm very curious to see. I want to take a time machine and leap forward and see the Christopher Nolan as an old man, what kind of films he's making, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
Maybe he'll turn into a kind of Terrence Malick mystic or something. Wouldn't that be fun?
I know he loves Terrence Malick. He's
one of the few apologists.
Yeah, he called The Tree of Life like one of the best films ever made, or in his top 10.
Yeah,
isn't that intriguing? You know a lot about a person based on what they like and which artists they admire.
Right.
Yeah. And The Theory of Everything, interestingly enough, also by a British filmmaker, but much more sentimental, I thought.
That's right, yeah.
And I wish the movie hadn't so slavishly adhered to the formula of inspirational drama.
Right.
That's the one kind of key point for the movie.
I agree. I didn't love the film either, and I think it would have been a lot more fascinating, because Hawking is a fascinating story
and a
complex person, and just his ideas. I would have liked more kind of engagement with some of that.
I mean, there was more science and more physics in Interstellar than there was in A Theory of Everything.
That's true, and it's in the context of a thrilling space adventure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what were your major weaknesses for the film?
With Theory of Everything? I mean, what Eugene said, I think it kind of stuck to a formula of kind of a feel-good Oscar winner of film. There wasn't a lot of unexpected stuff in the... I mean, I didn't know the story of his wife and what happened there, so I was kind of surprised by that. But storytelling-wise, and the way James Marsh told the story was not as inspiring as it should have been with someone like Stephen Hawking.
Yeah, because for me, it's such a missed opportunity, because Stephen Hawking is such a fascinating figure, and his theory has been kind of era-defining. But the movie does such a kind of superficial job with his ideas, and it's so slavishly try to just focus on the love story. And the love story is actually, if you really know what happened, it's actually quite complicated in terms of the relationship. But the movie itself, it still needed to end on this very kind of positive, uplifting note, which just felt really unearned to me.
It's probably going to win Best Screenplay, isn't it?
It's probably going to win Best Actor,
That's
right?
going to win Best Actor.